Now we're talking about the election. She, like many other celebrities after this election, decided to make her personal politics known. She wanted to launch an attack on not only Donald Trump, but his supporters. And she did so publicly on her Instagram story. And today we're going to read this.
Disney's live-action Snow White was supposed to be a bold reimagining of a timeless classic, but it quickly turned into a disaster, from Rachel Zegler's scathing comments about Trump supporters to the backlash over replacing the Seven Dwarfs with a diverse band. Everything about this film seemed to ignite outrage as costs spiraled and fans turned their backs. Disney was left with no choice but to cancel the project entirely. How did a story about magic and wonder become one of the most divisive chapters in Disney's history? Magic mirror on the wall, who's the fairest one of all? When Disney announced Rachel Zegler as the lead for its live-action White remake, it was clear they were taking a bold, if not risky, direction. Zegler, known for her outspoken opinions and willingness to stir the pot, wasn't exactly the safe choice for a role tied so closely to tradition and nostalgia. From the moment the casting news broke, fans were divided, some were intrigued, but a large chunk of Disney's loyal audience was left scratching their heads.
No, the original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her. Weird. So we didn't do that this time.
Zegler didn't help her case in interviews. She openly criticized the original Snow White, a film that essentially built Disney's empire. She dismissed it as outdated and irrelevant, calling the prince a creepy stalker and claiming that women today no longer crave the kind of romance the original story portrayed. For many, it felt like she wasn't just rejecting the film's themes, she was disrespecting a piece of cinematic history. Imagine being handed the keys to an iconic role, and instead of honoring it, you tear it down. Fans who grew up loving the classic film were understandably upset.
Dwarf actors that dream to be in a major motion picture such as this Disney remake. And now, because Peter Dinklage said what he said last year, now it's taken away.
As if that wasn't enough, the controversy deepened when Disney decided to replace the Seven Dwarfs with what they call a diverse band of magical creatures. The move, reportedly inspired by comments from actor Peter Dinklage, sparked outrage from dwarf actors, who saw it as a missed opportunity for representation in a major film. Longtime fans of Snow White were equally baffled. The original Seven Dwarfs weren't just side characters, they were integral to the heart of the story. By replacing them, Disney seemed to be rewriting the essence of what made Snow White timeless.
Well, it seems to me who've really suffered in all this are the 6 dwarf actors who would have expected to have roles in this remake in a massive Hollywood blockbuster, who are now not going to have that experience, or the money, or the fame that may have come with it.
The backlash was immediate and loud. Fans took to social media, accusing Disney of pandering and losing touch with its audience instead of celebrating the beloved fairy tale. This remake became a symbol of Hollywood trying too hard to be politically correct, and while the divisive casting could have been a progressive step, it felt forced and disconnected from the story's roots. What Disney seemed to overlook was that people don't watch Snow White for social commentary, they watch it for the magic, the charm, and the nostalgia.
And forging a new path forwards, this loss should not have been, and it certainly should not have been by so many votes, may Trump supporters and Trump voters and Trump himself never know.
Rachel Zegler isn't just an actress, she's someone who isn't afraid to voice her opinions, no matter how controversial. That outspokenness took center stage when her comments about Donald Trump and his supporters went viral. She didn't hold back, calling Trump's voters pitiful disappointments and wishing that they never know peace. For a public figure, especially one leading a major Disney project, this kind of statement was like throwing gasoline on an open fire.
To behave normally just isn't an option either. So the other day, in response to the presidential election, Zegler had a very public meltdown on her Instagram stories. She wrote, quote, "F you, Donald Trump." Then she proceeded to insult the 75 million Americans who voted for him, quote, "I find myself speechless in the midst of this. Another 4 years of hatred, leading us towards a world I do not want to live."
The backlash was immediate, and intense social media lit up with reactions mostly from Trump supporters who felt personally attacked. Many of them vowed to boycott her upcoming film, declaring that they wouldn't spend their money supporting someone who openly disrespected a large part of the country. It wasn't just the comments themselves that caused the outrage. It was the tone dripping with disdain that left many feeling insulted. This wasn't just about politics, it was about the message Slur sent. For a movie that needed broad appeal to succeed, her remarks alienated a massive portion of potential viewers. People weren't just criticizing her political stance, they were questioning why Disney, a brand known for its family-friendly image, would stay silent in the face of such polarizing behavior, and the silence only made things worse. Both sides of the political spectrum began to criticize Disney, one for not condemning her comments, the other for not supporting her more openly. What made the situation even more complicated was the timing. The political climate was already charged with Trump's recent election, dominating headlines. Instead of steering clear of controversy, Slur dove headfirst into it, making the Snow White project a battleground for cultural and political debates. Fans who might have been on the fence about the remake had yet another. It wasn't just her words, though. People started to question the larger issue of accountability. Gina Gano, another Disney actress, had been fired for her political statements that many considered less inflammatory than Slur's. So why was Slur still in a role despite comments that offended millions? The double standard wasn't lost on anyone, and it fueled the perception that Disney had lost its way. If there's one thing Disney probably regrets, it's how much money they've sunk into the Snow White live-action remake. This project has been plagued with setbacks, and every time it seemed like things couldn't get worse, they somehow did. What started as a simple reimagining of a classic snowball turned into a financial and public relations disaster. The first big issue was the fan backlash. People weren't happy with the changes to the story of the casting, and Disney tried to fix things with reshoot, but reshoot are never cheap, and in this case they reportedly cost hundreds of millions of dollars. Think about that, hundreds of millions spent just to salvage a movie that fans were already wary of. Even with all that money poured into making changes, nothing seemed to work. Fans who saw leaked clips online weren't impressed. Instead of the magical fairy tale they loved, the film seemed to focus on a hyper-modernized version of the story, which people called a feminist fever dream. It felt like Disney wasn't just reinterpreting the story, they were rewriting it completely. The delays didn't help either. The release date kept getting pushed back, with the latest delay moving the film to 2025. Each delay came with more bad press and more skepticism. People started to wonder if Disney even knew what it was doing with this film. When a project keeps getting pushed further out, it doesn't exactly scream confidence. What made it worse was that the criticism wasn't just about the film's concept or casting anymore, it was about the production itself, with the budget ballooning to outrageous levels. People questioned why Disney was still investing in a movie that seemed doomed to fail. Some fans even joked that the studio would have been better off scrapping the project entirely rather than throwing more money into something so divisive. To top it off, the constant leaks only added fuel to the fire. Small clips and details about the movie's new direction painted a picture of a film that strayed so far from the original that it barely felt like Snow White anymore. Fans weren't interested in seeing a modern political spin on the story, they wanted the magic and nostalgia that made the original a classic. Disney finally pulled the plug on its live-action Snow White project, and honestly, it felt like an inevitable move after months of mounting backlash, endless controversies, and a spiraling budget. There just wasn't a way to salvage what had become a sinking ship. Rachel Zegler's divisive public image played a big role in this decision, but the issues went much deeper than just one actress. The backlash against Snow White wasn't just loud, it was relentless. Fans were furious about the changes to the story, the replacement of the Seven Dwarfs, and Zegler's dismissive attitude towards the original film. The actress's public comments, especially her harsh words about Trump supporters, only poured gasoline on the fire. With such widespread criticism, Disney found itself in an impossible situation. How do you market a film when so many people have already vowed not to watch it? Financially, the project was a disaster. The budget had ballooned due to reshoots and delays, with costs running into the hundreds of millions for a film that was already struggling to generate positive buzz. Those kinds of expenses were hard to justify. On top of that, Disney has been dealing with a string of underperforming films, so it couldn't afford another high-profile flop. Shelving Snow White might have been a tough decision, but it was likely the only one left to make. What made the situation even more frustrating for fans was the glaring double standard. Many people pointed out how quickly Disney fired Gina Carano over her political views yet stood by Zegler for far more inflammatory comments. It wasn't until the backlash became completely untenable that the studio finally acted. This inconsistency didn't sit well with fans, who saw it as another example of Disney prioritizing politics over fairness and quality storytelling. Snow White became a cautionary tale for Disney. The project wasn't just a failure, it symbolized everything fans have been criticizing about the company in recent years, from prioritizing woke messaging over staying true to beloved stories to hiring polarizing figures who alienate audiences. Disney's missteps with this film were hard to ignore. Snow White fiasco has become another black mark on Disney's reputation, and it's not just about 1FM. This is a part of a bigger problem that's been brewing for years. Disney's struggle to find the balance between embracing modern values and staying true to the stories that built its empire. Fans are starting to wonder if the company even knows who its audience is anymore. For decades, Disney was the go-to name for timeless storytelling. People grew up with its characters, its songs, and its magic, but in recent years there's been a noticeable shift. The focus has moved away from creating universally loved tales and toward pushing messaging that often feels more like a lecture than entertainment. Snow White became the perfect example of this. The classic fairy tale wasn't just updated, it was overhauled in a way that alienated the very people who cherished it. The backlash wasn't surprising. Longtime fans felt betrayed watching Disney prioritize political correctness over preserving the magic that made its story special. It's not that audiences are against change, they just want it to make sense. When you strip a story of its heart and soul to chase a trend, people notice, they also start to lose trust. This isn't an isolated incident either. Snow White joins a growing list of controversies that have chipped away at Disney's once untouchable image, from unpopular remakes to accusations of double standards, like the treatment of Gina Carano versus Rachel Zegler. Disney keeps making headlines for all the wrong reasons. Each misstep pushes more fans away, leaving the company in a tricky spot. The real danger here isn't just losing one project or disappointing a few fans, it's the long-term damage to Disney's brand. The name that used to stand for family-friendly feel-good entertainment is starting to feel out of touch with the people who made it successful. When audiences can no longer count on Disney to deliver the kind of stories they love, they'll start looking elsewhere. This isn't the end for Disney, it's too big to collapse overnight, but the Snow White mess should be a wake-up call. If Disney wants to hold on to its legacy and its fans, it needs to refocus. People don't want divisive politics in their fairy tales, they want to laugh, cry, and escape into a world of wonder just like they always have. The question is whether Disney can find its way back before it loses its magic for good. So what are your thoughts on this? Let us know in the comments below.